Hello everybody, it's Jesse coming to you from my dorm room in Hong Kong. A wealthy Saudi businessman sued an American academic whose book on funding terror sold 23 copies online in the United Kingdom. Damages were set at £130,000 and court costs were quite high as well. This is all set in London. Online defamation suits are often brought to odd jurisdictions due to the plaintiff's ability to get better rewards in different jurisdictions. Minimum standards in the form of international treaty, where the judge would have a minimum requirement to accept or reject a case, might have a positive effect on the legal landscape of online defamation cases internationally. I'll expound below. Qualifiers in this treaty could be minimum requirements such as the amount of times that defamatory information was accessed online in that jurisdiction, the nationality of the people involved in the lawsuit, whether the lawsuit's brought in bad faith, and most importantly, how badly the reputation was affected. Now, for instance, the judge would have to accept a given case, say for instance, if 1,000 people access defamatory information in that jurisdiction. Conversely, they would have to reject if, say, only 200 had accessed that information. There would be a gray area in between where the judges could deliberate, but the fringes would be governed by the treaty. The specifics aren't entirely important. The most important thing is that judges need to make a concerted effort internationally to deal with the lack of legal certainty. And I think this is best done through a treaty, international treaty. Judges would still need to be able to apply the human test of reason. They could have a case-by-case basis. However, the treaty would allow for jurisdictional balance, legal certainty, and comity and competition between different forms. I'll start with jurisdictional imbalance as an example. Oftentimes, people run to different jurisdictions to sue. This has been known in England and Australia. Oftentimes, they're known to be the liberal capitals of the world. Conversely, oftentimes, people run from jurisdictions such as the United States, where it's known to be a little bit more difficult to sue for defamation. Minimum standards to accept and reject frivolous cases could cause difficulties for a would-be forum shopper. You could be rejected. Much like the forum non-convenience doctrine in common law, a judge could decide whether or not there was jurisdiction for this case. However, now this would be governed by an overarching treaty framework, which would create a lot more legal certainty than how it is at this moment. Lawyers who would normally lodge very frivolous lawsuits would now know whether or not they would be able to lodge them. This would decrease forum shopping and increase legal certainty. It could also force stubborn jurisdictions to take jurisdiction where they normally wouldn't, which is known to happen in the United States. As I said, the decrease in forum shopping creates legal certainty. If you know that your case is going to be rejected in England, you're not going to try to sue in England. This will cause more legal certainty, which I'll expound a little bit below. Legal certainty is a big issue online at the moment. There is a big lack of legal certainty. If I were to blog at this moment something incredibly controversial, I'm not really sure necessarily where I could be sued, if I would be sued, and how the proceedings would go where I sued. This obviously has an extremely negative effect on the way that I deal online and the way that I blog online. Certain effects can include, for instance, economic effects. If I do not censor myself on my blog, I might lose sponsorship due to being sued or having a bad name. This will lead me to be censored, to censor myself, which will lead me to have less free speech. Free speech is a Western principle, Western ideal, which is what we are trying to defend. If we have minimum standards which govern whether or not I will be sued and where I will be sued, I will be much more confident what will happen if I were to say something quite controversial. This will lead me to be much more bold in my online dealings. Bold moves is what defines the internet. Bold moves will help me on my internet, dealing with my internet. Oftentimes it's hard to understand each other, let alone in the legal sphere. Defamation cases are no different, especially international defamation cases. This confusion can be tackled in an international perspective, with an international treaty. We can use our differences for competition. We can harness our opposing qualities. We can use those for positive. We can balance workload and increase fairness by dealing with each other. The areas between the minimum to reject and the minimum requirements to accept will be governed by judicial comity. That is, not necessarily which jurisdiction is best, but which is more appropriate. That would mean that we have respect for different jurisdictions. That would mean that judges would try and find the most appropriate jurisdiction, not just allow people to sue necessarily in England or not allow them to sue in the United States. It would be a quest to find the most appropriate jurisdiction within the treaty laid out. As I said before, it's not that we're better or that they're better. It's more that this could be more appropriate for you or that would be more appropriate for you. This would be dealt with judicial respect, judicial comity. They would leave the most appropriate jurisdiction to deal with the case. Competition and affirmative action will go hand in hand. That is, the judge will deal with the gray areas. The judge will deal with issues such as the human test of reason. If a case is brought in bad faith, it won't be overly mechanical. What the treaty will deal with is the fringes. It will give more legal certainty. It will balance out jurisdictions, and it will cause us to be much more certain online. As it's been said before, international issues need international solutions. I think this is an international solution for an international issue. An overarching treaty to deal with the fringes and the issues of legal certainty online. We need an overarching doctrine of international minimum standards which will allow judges to deliberate within a broad boundary while being guided by them. They can be within the boundary while still using human tests of reason to judge within the boundary. Thank you. That is my Pecha presentation.